There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 292. And today on the show, I'm joined by Mark Drury to get an absolute masterclass on everything he's learned about handling the moments leading up to a shot on an animal and everything to do afterwards to ensure a successful recovery. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Onyx. And like I just said, we've got the mad scientist himself, Mark Drury, on the show again. And as has been the case, every other time he's been on the podcast, this one is just fascinating. We already had the conversation. I know what you're about to listen to, and I know you're going to enjoy it. Our focus in this one, though, is pretty different than our past episodes with him. If you remember, the last two we did were really in the weeds conversations around all the different factors that influence deer movement. Today, we're taking a huge pivot from that, moving in a very different direction, but equally interesting. And our focus is all about closing the deal in this very last part of a hunt, that being everything that happens in those seconds and minutes leading up to a shot, how you actually execute that shot, and then finally everything, and I mean everything you need to be thinking about when it comes to determining what kind of hits you got, how long to wait before tracking, how to start the track job, how to learn more things from the arrow, from the site of impact, from how the deer behaved, all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's a level of detail on this topic that I don't think we've definitely never gone into this degree on this podcast. And I don't know if I've ever run across any other resource, any other podcast that's done this to this degree either. So, man, I'm just pumped for you guys to hear this one, especially with hunting season so close to arriving. I think it's just the perfect topic to get just like into the nitty gritty on, to make sure that we're all going to be capitalizing on that, one special moment when it finally does arrive, when it hopefully does arrive. I want to make sure that we all, squeak out every little bit of good karma, of good luck, of having the odds in your favor. Make sure we're doing everything we possibly can be doing to make sure that our hunt ends the right way. All right, with me on the line again, for the first time probably since, it was almost exactly 1 year ago, we got Mark Drury back with us on the show. Thanks for coming back, Mark.
Thank you for having me, Mark. How you doing?
I'm great. We were just talking before we recorded how this is that time of year that we're just running around like crazy people, and that's definitely the case for me. And I've got camouflage lined up, sitting out by my truck. So as soon as we get done recording, I'm gonna have a quick bite with my wife and son, and then jump in the truck, drive to a property, and try to get out in time to see some bucks on the bean fields. So.
There you go. Beautiful weather for it right now.
Yeah, it's actually not too bad. A little bit of a cool streak. So, what about you? Doing well over there in Iowa and Missouri?
Absolutely, man. Things are good. I mean, got some new property we've been playing with this summer, setting it up for the fall, which is always exciting. Mm-hmm. Cameras are running. Haven't really checked any as of yet. Probably be a few weeks before I check them. But things are good. We've had some decent weather here in terms of rain this summer on the crops. Started out really wet, then really dry. Now we've had a few decent timely rains, so that's always a plus. And at the studio, it's been all things DeerCast, man. It's been overtime trying to get it ready and ready for launch here.
Yeah, a lot of new stuff coming down the pipeline here. And one of these days, I'd love to just get an excuse to talk to you for an hour or two just about what's going on in your life and what you're doing on your farm. But I know people probably want us to just get into the nitty-gritty. So I had an idea for our chat that is related to what's coming down the line with DeerCast. Here's what I was thinking. Over the years, both getting to chat with you on the 100% Wild podcast a lot, and then being on a number of Wired to Hunt podcasts, and then of course, I've consumed your shows and DVDs for years and years and years. There's been a handful of things that have stood out to me about you. First, and you can correct me if you think these are wrong, but of course, it's always been a standout that you are super analytical when it comes to your approach to deer hunting, which has always been something I've loved because I've kind of tried to, I feel like that resonates with me a lot. And I've mirrored a lot of what I do from things I've learned from you over the years. But the other thing that always has just been at least apparent to me is that you seem to be just ice cold in the moment of truth. You are locked down, you are unfazed, you are on point every single time you've got a deer walking into range. And then you are on it as soon as you pull the trigger too. You seem to know just what to do afterwards. You have a plan in place. Everything seems to be well thought out when it comes to what happens before the shot and after the shot. And it also seems like you've had a ton of experience with those moments, probably as much or more than almost anyone else out there. So this all brings me to what I thought we could drill into today, which is this whole topic of what happens before and after the moment of the shot. So everything leading up to the deer coming into range and how you are handling that moment and things when it comes to your archery practice or firearm practice, whatever, and then everything that brings us to how you actually recover a deer. And I think that's, correct me if I'm wrong here, but that ties in really perfectly to one of the new features coming out with DeerCast that I do want to hear more about at this point. So A, is that right? Am I way off base of those things? And B, if I'm not off base, should we dive into that?
I would love to dive into it. And, we've been doing it for a long time. And through time, if you learn disciplines out there in the field that life's all about eliminating problems going forward. So if you make some bad hits in your early days and you're like, that track job was miserable, man. I couldn't find my deer. I'm mad at myself for injuring an animal. You get to the point where you're like, I'm not going to let that happen anymore. And sometimes it takes some bad experiences to get you to that point. So, I try to make sure that every shot I take is as ethical as I possibly can be. More than anything, you just want to eliminate that tough track job and that, not being able to find that animal. It's a miserable feeling, and you feel bad for the animal. You feel bad for yourself, your cameraman, whoever's with you. It's like, don't let it happen. So therefore you get into a mental state where you just, you disallow that to even happen, and you just don't take bad shots basically. And if you can discipline yourself to that level, you'll end up being a lot happier on more blood trails. But that's one of the reasons we did DeerCast track, though, too. It's going to happen, right? If you bow hunt long enough, because you can't control what the deer's going to do. You can control what you're doing, but there's two sides to every kill when it comes to white-tailed deer. One's you. The other's the deer. You can't anticipate if they're going to jump. You can't anticipate what they're going to do when that bow goes off, and what they do and how they react varies at different distances. So, there's a lot of variables there with weather and, the mood of the animal, the time of the year, all that good stuff. So trying to run up through those in your mind at the moment will help you make better choices more often.
Mm-hmm. One of those things that's easier said than done sometimes, though, right? In those, the craziness of those last couple seconds, there's, like you said, so many variables. Before I start bugging you with 10,000 questions, let's just get what this new tool is you guys are putting out there, because I'm really interested. I've heard a few high-level things, but I don't really know the details yet. You mentioned DeerCast Track. What's that?
DeerCast Track is the newest feature within DeerCast that, much like the algorithm last year that we put out there under DeerCast, which helped predict deer movement, which you and I had done some podcasts about that. And, we were trying to, trying to communicate what Terry and I kind of felt in terms of our theories on when deer move and why they move. And we had some really good podcasts about that. You and I have.
Yeah.
And the algorithm kind of interpreted that for people and showed them what the deer or how well they might be moving in their area. So this year we came out with DeerCast Track. So we wanted to handle everything up to the moment of truth, like help them become better at anticipating the optimal days to be in the field. And then with that, all of our different tactics within 13 or within the app and all that good stuff. And then, okay, you're in the right place. You're there at the right time because of DeerCast. You make the shot. Now what? And to me, tracking and the art of tracking and helping people find deer is probably, I don't want to say it's a lost art form, but it's one that doesn't get covered very often. Like you see some of the basic stuff at 10,000 feet, you hit them in the double, you double lung them, go find them. And well, through the years, I've double lung a bunch of deer that were still alive at the 1 hour mark or the 3 hour mark. And I started, digging down on this going, why did I hit right here and the deer's still alive hours later, right? So, if you track enough deer, a variety of different things are going to happen. And I noticed through the season more and more and more, I used to always get calls about what are the deer going to do? I got a weather front coming. Do you think they're going to move? What phase are we in? Blah, blah, blah. And all those calls went away throughout the season for me in terms of, deer movement prediction when we came out with DeerCast because it was all in the app.
Right.
Okay. So self-preservation, level B is now I go on about 3 or 4 track jobs a night, not in person, but over my phone, guys from the team or guys across the industry. Hey, I hit the deer here. How long would you wait? What would you do? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, man, wouldn't it be cool if our app took everyone through every single possible scenario you could have shooting a deer with a bow or a gun? And that's what we did with DeerCast Track. And it's fairly simple. You have a deer, you can flip it left or right. You can do it with the hide on or hide off. So you can go into a 2D model, which exposes vitals, or you can just do it as you saw the deer standing there. And you can pick your point of impact. From the point of impact, the app opens up and does the rest for you. So say you hit mid-body right in front of the back ham. Terrible shot, okay? But it happens sometimes. You hit a sleeve, you hit a branch, arrow goes awry, or you've hit them back there with a gun. You pick that point of impact with our little cursor. And then the app, our program, will unfold anywhere from 2 to 6 or 7 hits from our video library that show shots in that area, okay? Then you can choose any shot you wish. Go, you know what, that's the body angle, or that's the one that most closely matches what I just did. You choose it. It then shows you a chart of, what broadhead was used or what weapon was used on the video hit. It'll tell you how long we waited, what happened on the blood trail, what the blood trail looked like, what the estimated time of death was for that animal, how far that animal traveled. And then you go into Tracker John Engelken, Bobby Culbertson, myself, and Terry breaking down that hit, telling you exactly what you may have hit, how long you should wait, what type of blood sign you should look for. And then we will also address, well, if you hit the same point of impact and the animal was quartering away, you might have also increased and picked up these organs within the deer. Or if he was quartering 2, you might have hit this. So we literally take you from broadside quartering 2, quartering away, and we address every possible scenario. You can watch all of those videos. If that doesn't exactly, give you the information you think you need, you go to the next hit, the next hit, the next hit. So this series by October 1 will probably have 100 different hits in it. When it goes to, at release date right now, there's probably 65 to 70, and we'll probably end up in the 100 to 110, and we're going to continue adding to the series. So there will be real life, real world experiences at your fingertips. And we then go into, within the descriptions, whether it's John, Bobby, myself, or Terry, 3D modeling, 2D modeling, and tell you exactly what you probably hit with that path, whether it be your gun or your bow. And it absolutely takes you from having no clue on how to wait or what to expect or how far that deer should go to absolutely giving you every bit of information you could possibly ask for to help you recover your animal. And even the hits, Mark, one of the ones that I see guys make most often where they end up tracking too soon and losing their deer is that space behind the heart. If you're right behind the leg, your deer might run 70 yards because you clipped the aortic arch coming out of the heart and he's dead, right? If you're back from that just a little bit, you're in the liver, and then another couple inches behind that, you're into the stomach. Literally within 5 ribs, you're from go get him to a 30-hour wait.
Yeah.
Okay. And somewhere in between there's liver, which is, 10, 12, depending on broadhead size. All of this stuff is covered within DeerCast Track. You just simply pick point of entry and the app opens up into a whole world that you've just never seen before. It's literally the coolest thing we've ever done at Drury Outdoors.
Wow. Yeah, you guys, you continue to outdo yourselves. I'm impressed and I'm excited because I do think you're absolutely right. There's usually 2 kinds of conversations that I'm on when it comes like all my different hunting group text messages and stuff like that. There's the, what do you think they're going to do tonight? And then it's the, if you get a hit, then all of a sudden the text message comes through or the phone calls come through, just like you said, hey, here's the shot. What do you think? And then they send you a screenshot of the video or they talk you through it, or they'll send you a picture of a deer and they'll try to mark where the impact was. And like, that's such a thing that happens every night during the hunting season. There are groups of buddies debating and questioning and wondering and worrying about this very topic. So you definitely identified a big need. You nailed it.
It's one that's never addressed. Have you seen it addressed very thoroughly? I mean, I've seen stories about it. Like I said, it's 10,000 feet. You kind of hit a few things.
Yeah.
But never into the detail that we're about to take people. Like Tracker John's, Tracker John Engelken has trained for tracking his entire life. He has the best bloodhounds I've ever seen. So he gets called in on the really crappy hits. So he sees the worst of the worst. He's been on over 2,000 hits in his life.
Wow.
Bobby Culbertson is the head guide at Terra Wildlife in Mississippi. He has been for 21 years. So he's been on over 2,000 track jobs. Terry and I collectively have probably approaching 1,000 or more. So if you take the tracking experience of 5,000 track jobs and roll it into one app, that's who's going with you along your track job. So I think this fall, you're going to be seeing people when they make their hit, they're going to go into DeerCast, pick their point of impact, and then start passing you on and go, hey, watch this video. Listen to what Tracker John said at this time. Do you agree with that or do you not? Man, it's so in depth and it's going to make people so much smarter. And then I think the long-term effect will be it's going to make people think better, think more, make better shots, making sure they don't hit in this area and that hit in this area versus that area. It'll make you smarter if you take the time to really play with it and go through it and watch some of the results, put the cursor on some deer and go, holy cow, I didn't know I needed to wait 30 hours in that area. And here's why, we also go through like 16 or 17 really advanced courses in tracking in general, what the blood on the arrow means, what a bed means, what blood in the bed means, the trails between the beds, the weather's effect on tracking deer. Everything you could possibly imagine is also in this series. It's right next to all of the different hits. You slide over and you pick advanced tracking tips. You watch all those pieces. You're like, oh my God, these guys are unbelievable. Bobby and John are like no one else on this earth that I know of. And for years, when I've had a bad hit, if John was available, we've used him. But I always send the video to Bobby Culbertson. And they are always 100% correct. That's the other thing I've noticed through the years. Like their assessment of what I just did or whoever it is on the team, they are always spot on. And I was like, man, wouldn't this be cool to put this information at everybody's fingertips? So that's why we did DeerCast Track. And it's going to help people find a lot of deer, and it's going to help people stop bumping deer, because that's the big deal, right? They coagulate and they clot up so quickly. Mm-hmm. If you bump them out of that initial bed, your odds just go way down of ever finding that deer. Whereas if you wait the appropriate amount of time, he's going to be dead in his first bed or second or third, which is going to be close to the first one.
Yeah. Man, it sounds like something that a lot of people will benefit from. And I'm going to benefit from it, but I'm too antsy to wait to look at the app to get some of this information. So I'm going to have you tell me about some of this stuff right now.
You betcha.
The first thing I want to know is, do you have a feature on the app that helps a guy with some red-green color blindness? Because I need that.
Isn't that the truth, dude? I'm the same way. I don't see well, especially at night. And I am very blessed in the fact that Wade and Taylor both see blood incredibly well. So I literally, I let them out front, and I'm like, I'll stand at last blood, guys.
Yep.
You go ahead, because their eyes, it just speeds up the process because they can see so much better than me. But I'm in the same shape. I don't see blood very well at all.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I can see it, but it takes me so much longer to pick it up versus people that don't have that. It just stands out to them so much more in the dark conditions, especially, like you said. So it sounds like
have bright enough light. You cannot find one. I mean, it's the brighter they are, the better.
So I think I need a good cameraman or a daughter who can help me. That's my next step then.
Or a dog, if it's legal. I mean, we've learned so much by following Tracker John and Jesse and Janie and Holly and Haley. I mean, his dogs that he's had through the years have been just incredible. But you got to make sure it's legal in your area.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about all that, but I want to rewind a little bit because I do want to pick your brain about the before the shot stuff.
Yes,
because, like I said, I feel like, at least from the outside looking in, it seems like you've got it together better than a lot of people. And no knock on Terry, but it seems like you might have it better a little bit than he does sometimes. I've seen him get a little shook up.
We all, though. I mean, don't we all?
We do.
But here's the secret. I'm in the studio more than Terry, so I just cut out all my mistakes.
There you go. But tell me this. Was the younger version of Mark Drury like that? Like 30, 40 years ago when you were 20 or whatever, did you always have it like this, or did you have some struggles early on too?
And I've had struggles throughout the years. I mean, I always get shook up, and it's the same struggle whether it's a doe or a buck, and you just, you shoot and that arrow doesn't end up where you thought it was going to, and you go, what in the heck just happened? And I think that when you add adrenaline to any situation, you're just asking for bad decision making, right? It's like if you could sit there, if the deer was foam, right, you can plug the 12 ring every single shot at 30 yards or 40 or 50, whatever you're shooting at, but when it's real life and they're coming in and that body posture is changing and moving and God help you if it's the rut and he's coming in fast and you got to think fast and it just accelerates everything. So adrenaline just screws everything up. So I think more often than not, when someone makes a mistake, it's because they let adrenaline get the most of them. And it really comes down to the success in the heat of the moment, which is what you're talking about, comes down to, I think, your ability to handle emotion at when it's at its peak. When your adrenaline's topped out and you can't practice adrenaline. I say it all the time. You can't do it. I've read articles and heard guys say, well, go run the 100-yard dash 6 times and then shoot the arrow. It's still not the same. Mm-hmm. It's not the same feeling in your body. The only way you can do that is to put yourself in that situation more often and think your way through it. And I think the biggest mistake hunters probably make is not shooting enough does, frankly, or not shooting enough game in general. I think the more times you put yourself in that situation, the better you become through time, because you have to learn by your mistakes, and that's just sad to say, but it's the truth. The more you shoot, the more does you kill, the more bucks you kill. For that matter, the more rabbits you kill, the more squirrels you kill, the turkeys, whatever it is, then you just get better every time it comes around again. So it's all about slowing the game down. Jim Thome talks about it all the time. And you look at baseball, you look at a guy like Jim, you want pressure, or any baseball player for that matter, put him in a stadium of 40 or 50,000 screaming fans in the playoffs, and then throw a heater on the outside corner high at 93. How in the hell do they connect and take it out of the park, right? I mean, because could you imagine the adrenaline in that moment in time? No. So he always talks and has to us for years about slow that game down, ignore every other thing, and focus. Your focus has to be so intense in that moment. And I don't want to say that the emotion that I feel is it's adrenaline, but I almost channel it into like a focus of, I don't want to say anger, but a focus of determination to make this happen. Do not screw this up. So channel the adrenaline into a positive place in your body, as opposed to letting it become a negative and making bad choices. Like, use it, make it, or let it make you determined to the point that you're not going to screw this up, and for us, the video camera's rolling. So it's like, you don't want to make a bad shot. It still happens, but you don't want to. So you have to channel that adrenaline into your brain and go, all right, slow down, dummy. Stop. Think about something else. Think about the vitals. Think about where this arrow is going to exit. Think about anything you can to give yourself the assistance you need to make a good shot. If you can do that, you're going to put yourself through the lungs and through the boiler room more often. If you can't do that, you're going to go on a lot of bag track jobs, and you're going to need deer cast track more often.
Yeah. So what is going on in your brain in, like, let's say you see a buck coming into range, you decide, okay, this is a shooter buck. You grab your bow. Those things you just mentioned, is that the self-talk? Like, are you saying, don't be stupid, don't do this? Or what are you talking to yourself? Like, what does those next 10 seconds look like for you?
Every single second of the moment of truth is me telling myself, do not jack this up. Here it is, or here she is, whatever the target is, do not make a bad shot. Do not draw too soon. Do not release too quickly. Make sure of the body posture. Like, I have a checklist in my mind where I'm thinking about not only where they're at, but I'm thinking where they're going, because sooner or later, or very quickly, where they're going is where they went, and you're already behind the game. So I'm in terms of thinking ahead a little bit, and I want to make sure I don't draw too soon. I want to make sure I don't make any noise to alert the deer to my presence. And I go through that mental checklist. And then when the moment of truth comes, I'm aiming, I'm stopping the deer if need be, and I'm thinking exit. I always think where this arrow is going to exit. I never think of entry. And I think thinking of exit kind of helps me a little bit. I'm thinking about, I want to hit there so that it ends up right behind that leg or at the base of that tree. That's where I'm putting it. I'm going to put it right at the base of that tree, or I'm going to put it right at the edge of the food plot, or I'm going to aim a little bit low to make sure this deer drops into it, and then that arrow ends right there. So I always think in terms of exit and not enter. And I don't know if that helps me, but it doesn't hurt, certainly.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I haven't heard anyone else mention that before, but it's something I think about, but it's not something that I'm putting first and foremost. So that's a very good point. You mentioned this checklist, and body posture is one, when to draw is one, thinking about the exit. Is there anything else on your mental checklist worth mentioning?
Don't spook them. Don't let them know you're there. That's my number one. Do not spook them. It's why Taylor says I whisper yell. It's why Wade says I whisper yell. I'm constantly, don't move, don't do this, don't do that, watch that. Don't put your rangefinder down. Put it in your pocket, get ready, whatever it is. I'm constantly whispering through the process to make sure that I don't alert that animal to me. Because when they figure out you're there, your chances just went way down that you're about to kill that deer. I mean, way down. It might cut them in half or cut them by 75%. Because they will, once they figure out you're there, it's almost over every time.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. When you let's just talk about body posture, what you can tell by that deer and how that changes your shot at all. Because, right, there's a situation where the deer has no idea you're there. I imagine you would aim and shoot in a certain way. And then there's a situation where the deer is aware of something going on. How does your shot or your behavior differ between those two at all?
If they're calm and they're within my effective range, and my effective range, I like them within 30. When you get outside of 30, bad things start to happen. And I've shot deer outside of that, but that depends on weather and conditions and all that. But let's take a calm evening, because so often when deer are moving, it's calm and not a ton of wind blowing. Okay, so calm evening or calm morning. So you first have to say, okay, they're going to hear my bow go off if you're bow hunting. So I sight in low anyway. Like, my 20-yard pin hits about 2.5 inches low. 30, I'm 3 inches low. 40, I'm 4 inches low. So I will aim on, because instinctively I always aim on. I aim to exit, and then I just let the arrow drop on its own, and it almost never fails. They don't go up. They're always going down, and oftentimes they still go down too damn far, and I'm still too high. right? Because I've misjudged the yardage, or they've dropped me more than I anticipated, or whatever. So I always sight in low, and then if the animal's calm and the evening is calm and there's no wind moving, then I'm judging distance. All right. If they're within the teens, if they're 17, 18 and under, I'll aim on and feel like I'm going to get the job done. Once you get to 22, and there's a real hole there from like 22 to 28 or 30, that distance where they hear that sound crisply and cleanly and they react immediately, like, man, can a deer do a lot in that distance, because they hear the bow immediately. And I mean, they'll drop a damn foot on you, you know? So I anticipate distance versus how much air is moving. If it's calm and they're at 26, 27, I'm worried at that distance, because they're going to hear it and they're probably going to drop, and, you know, and then bad things start to happen. So I aim even a little bit lower. I often sight my bow in low and then also aim at heart or top of heart, or exit through the heart, I should say. And that has helped me a great deal through the years to put it in through the right place, because they're going to drop. If it's windy, you can throw all that out the window, because generally they won't hear you. And it really helps you put the arrow where you need to. I love 12, 15 mile an hour with leaves rattling. The more noise you get, the better, because they don't hear that bow go off. So always take into consideration what you're dealing with from an environmental standpoint. Highway noise will help you. Wind noise will help you. Rain noise will help you. Other deer's commotion will help you. If your target deer is attentive to them, that'll help. But the moment their eyes get wide and they start looking at you and you feel like you're found, then I get really, really nervous about taking that shot. And then I'm probably going to do the same thing that I'm doing at that 25, 26, 27 yard distance. And I'm aiming really, really low on that deer. I mean, you just have to anticipate that drop, or you're going to hit them high shoulder or go over the back.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, you know, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver, off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish, or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
So what about a scenario where it's one of these longer range situations that I know you typically don't find yourself in, but I think I've seen some where you're 40 yards or maybe out there past that a little bit.
Usually, especially if there's wind.
Yeah. So if it is like a good setup, though, and you're going to do that type of shot, how much lower do you have to shoot on a 40, 45 yard shot if you're assuming that, 12 inches max, 15, 16, 17 inches they could drop?
I never aim off the deer because it's just counterintuitive to do so. The lowest that I will aim is to take it through center of heart. That's about as low as I'll possibly aim, because just as soon as you aim off a deer, there's going to be one stand there and take it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm always on deer, but I will aim center of heart, which is quite low in a deer's anatomy. So you're just literally 2 or 3 inches off the bottom of their chest at that distance. And it generally works out pretty good.
Yeah. Now, what about stopping deer? So I know there's always this debate between do you want to stop a deer because you want a standing still shot, but you then risk alerting a deer to your presence and then him possibly dropping more? Or do you, let's say it's a very slowly meandering buck, do you prefer the slow meander that doesn't know you're there at all?
If you've watched my shots through the years, they are always preceded by man, I want that deer dead still, dead calm when I'm aiming at him, unless he's close. Okay, if he's close and meandering real slow, I'll go ahead and shoot. All right, but if he's out there 25, by close I mean 15 and in, if he's out there at 22, 25, 27, 30, whatever, I want that sucker dead still. I mean, they're wiry little creatures anyway. And the reason I want him dead still is because I want body posture to stop in the position that I want it in. Because their difference between quartering to and quartering away is a head turn sometimes, right? They can open that shoulder up or close it down really quickly. If they're browsing over here to their left, their right side's open. If they suddenly don't even take a step and browse over here to the right, it closes. It might take 3 ribs from you with that front shoulder, if you know what I mean. Like it closes it back up. So I put them in a dead stop so I know the body posture. I read it quickly and go, okay, there's my seam, and I take it, so I always stop them. That's just me. I don't like shooting at moving deer. Bad things happen when you shoot at a moving deer, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. Let's rewind a little bit to another thing you mentioned. You talked about this checklist and you mentioned when to draw. And that's one of those things that almost never gets talked about, but it seems like most new hunters never think about that. It seems to be it takes some time and some experience to realize that's actually a really key decision. Can you walk me through some of the things you're thinking about when you're deciding when to draw? And then I'll throw a part B on that. What about the scenario when the deer spots you and you haven't drawn yet? Like you're on him, you're about to draw back, and then he spots you. Do you ever do I know he's looking at me, I'm still going to draw back and try to get the shot, or do you wait? So that's a two-parter.
You're making my heart pound because that's just the worst situation, right? When your target's coming and then he looks up at you or looks at you regardless. Yes. I hate that situation. Ugh. It happens. I always wait him out. I don't draw with him looking at me ever, unless he's broadside and I feel like I can kill him, and I feel like I've got decent cover, then I'll draw real slow and shoot. But to your first question, when do you draw? For me, I used to draw too damn soon and I'd get hung out to dry, right? They're browsers. They'll stop and they'll nibble on a limb and they'll do this. If you draw at a deer at 40 yards coming, you're just asking for trouble to where you have to let down. The more I hunt, the longer I wait to draw. I'm almost to the point where I don't draw until the deer's well within bow range and it's time to kill him. So I'm drawing later than I am sooner. But again, you have to think about not where he's at, but where he's going. So is there a tree where his head's about to pass behind? Is he, does he stop and turn around and look for, a noise he just heard? Is it windy out? Is it calm out? All of those things have to play into your decision. If it's calm, that's the tough one, man, because they're going to hear that. They're going to hear your clothes. They're going to hear movement in your tree or in the blind. And you just better be ready. If you're going to draw on a calm night, he better already be within bow range and presumably at a decent body posture. That's what I'm drawing on him. If it's windy, and you got decent noise, whether that be from a highway or wind or whatever, you can draw a little sooner and get it full draw and let him come on in. So you have to use some common sense about, okay, is this deer going to hear or see me draw or is he not? If your answer to that is at all, yes, he might, then I'm waiting until he's already within bow range so that if he stops and catches you, at least you're at full draw and you can get down on him and hopefully he's still in a good body posture to where you can shoot him. So I have a tendency to wait longer than draw sooner. Now, if it's windy, I'll try to get the drop on him, get drawn. And if he's coming hard, I'm like, oh, that deer's going to come on through. There's nothing going to stop him. I'll draw a little sooner and that way I'm ready for him. Boy, when you're at full draw and one walks within range, there's no better feeling because it's like holding a crossbow at that time, right? Mm-hmm. But if If he's coming slow, I wait and wait and wait and wait until it's time, because a slow moving deer oftentimes stays slow moving, and a fast moving deer oftentimes stays, quickly moving. So you got to anticipate all that in the moment of truth and make good judgment calls based on their demeanor, their speed, and the overall environmental conditions.
Yeah. So let's talk archery a little bit. So you get to full draw, you're at that moment. What do you like? Do you have an archery shot process mantra or things that you're looking at? Like, do you check your grip, check your level? Do you anything like that going through your mind at that moment, or is it just draw, pin, shoot?
No, I go through a little bit of a mental checklist there too, because when I've made bad shots in the past, it's because I grip my bow too much. I think the adrenaline just, you just want to, rip a hole through your handle. And in reality, you got to loosen that grip. So that's the mental checklist that I have to go through. Everything else is muscle memory because I shoot a great deal. So everything else comes as second play. Bend at the hip is the other one. Like if you're going to make a bad choice or a bad shot, oftentimes you didn't bend correctly. Those are the two things that I see, or three, I should say. It's shooting with clothing you're not used to and your anchor point changes. 2, it's not bending at the hip. Or 3, it's gripping your bow too hard because adrenaline took over in the moment of truth. So I go through those 3 things, make sure, okay, my anchor point's right. I am bent correctly. My back is in the correct position and my grip is fantastic. Then it's pin and shoot. So I do checklist a few things to make sure that they're all right, because otherwise you're going to make a bad shot.
Yeah.
Bad shot.
Yeah, it's easy. One of the things I've struggled with over the years is just rushing the shot. I've kind of come to call it target panic. It's more so like as soon as that pin hits, sometimes like the arrow's flying once the pin's where I want it before I get to like take a couple of breaths and ease into it. So I've been working on a lot of things over the last couple of years to try to regain control of that process. But like you said, it's easy for that to get away from you and to forget a few of those things if you're not in control, I guess.
I think if you make yourself think, though, like it helps you be in control, if that makes sense. It's the mindless, it's the without thought process shots that you regret, right? So exactly. Do you want to have a lifetime of regret or a season of regret? Or do you want to go, you know what, I did everything I could to kill that deer and I just missed because I misjudged yardage or whatever. So make yourself check those boxes, grip, back, hips, anchor point. Make yourself think through those things, and then you'll make a better shot because you did slow the game down. That right there is slowing the game down. If you examine our videos and you watch when from map to shot going off is literally a half a second, the deer's still planting its front foot, that's a shot that was taken too soon. The ones that are executed the best through time are the ones where the person stops the deer or after the deer stops and the guy's already at full draw and there is aim happening. You can tell the checklist is being checked. A great example of that is Greg Glessinger this year. Greg's one of the best shots that I know of in terms of just a guy that goes out hunting. He doesn't do tournaments, any of that stuff, but you wouldn't want to shoot him for a Coca-Cola in your backyard. I mean, the dude can flat handle a bow. All right. Well, watch him last year on that 239 that he killed in Iowa. From the moment he stops it till that shot goes off, it's like 5 or 6 seconds, man. Wow. He's going through that checklist. He went through it 2 or 3 times and he makes a perfect shot. So force yourself to do it because the deer's not going anywhere more often than not. I mean, you got to judge that a little bit, but chances are it's not going anywhere because they're just sitting there. They're oftentimes when they haven't winded you, if you've ever noticed, deer are generally quite patient with their surroundings. Like they'll sit there and they'll examine stuff they have the patience of a cat. They'll stand there and stare at stuff for minutes on end and not move. So unless they're already about to run, if you've got an at-ease deer on your hands or one that still hasn't found you, chances are he's not going anywhere because they generally don't flee until they have to flee.
Yeah. Does any of this stuff for you differ when it comes to gun hunting? Does your mental checklist or any of these things, obviously we're not going to be talking about a few of the specifics, but what does your process look like, I guess, when you're out there with the shotgun or the rifle or the muzzle?
I think it's more important because you're dealing with distance, right? More often than not. If they're close, it's one thing. But if you're dealing with a shot at 200, 225, man, small mistakes on the back end make big mistakes downrange. I missed a deer last year I should have never missed. Last last 20 minutes of rifle season, giant 160, 165, didn't even know who the deer was, 225-yard shot, and I shot right over the sucker. And I still to this day don't know how I did that. Like, I think I got a little rushed because we had already started packing things up, and Wade and I were like, well, end of rifle season, let's get out of here and go, whatever, have a beer, whatever. And all of a sudden, up over the hill, here comes this giant, and I'm like, what in the heck is that? Wade's like, oh, definite shooter. And he's coming across the hill pretty quick, not very long. He's going to be out of my sight window. And I rushed through all that stuff, didn't do any of my checklist stuff, got the gun out the window, put it on him, and I missed the deer. Gun out of the window of the blind, and I missed the deer. And that one still haunts me, makes me mad, actually. Taking a little more time, I would have killed that deer because it's a shot, at 225, you ought to be shooting a pop can top, right? But I missed him, and that was just, I rushed it, got excited, rushed it.
Yeah, it happens. What about?
So to answer your question, it's just as important, if not more. You add distance to it, and you're going to goof it up. Also, make sure your gun's on. That's the biggest mistake people make. Is assuming that scope's still on from the previous year. That's a bad assumption because they do float.
Yeah, it's easy to get lazy with that. I have been guilty of that in past years for sure.
You should practice with a gun almost as much as you do with a bow. The good shooters do. The bad ones don't. If you practice makes perfect in everything you do. When it comes to taking the life of an animal, you owe it to that animal to get your butt on the range. You can't make an assumption. And I think bow hunters are kind of like guilty of this. It's like, oh, it's a gun. Just go out and kill one. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Take the time, whether it's a muzzleloader, shotgun, rifle, take the time on the range just like you do with your bow, and you'll be a lot happier in the end.
Yeah. Speaking of practicing situations like that, and I'm guilty of what you just said, but another thing that I've done over the years that has helped me, I'm curious if you've ever done anything like this, is I try to practice for potential specific situations once I get in the tree or in the blind. So let's say I climb up into the tree, I get settled, and I've still got like 3-4 hours before prime time. When I have that little bit of free time early on, I will actually grab my bow and I will look at a potential spot I think there's going to be a buck, and then I will draw back and imagine a buck walking to that lane and actually go through almost the entire process. And I try to do that every spot I think there might be a shot, just like mentally walking myself through that exact scenario, like really physically looking at it, like thinking, okay, there's a buck, he's an 8-pointer, or it's this buck I've been chasing, here he comes. And I try to somehow practice that scenario. And I think that helps me a little bit, that kind of visualization technique. Do you ever do anything like that, or do you think there's merit to something along those lines?
Absolutely. 100% every single day I've ever sat in a tree or blind, exactly what you just described. And I have a tendency to do it throughout the sit. Even if I'm not drawing, I'm still mentally going, what if he walks through here? What if he walks through there? What if he walks through there? And I think it's one of the reasons that, if you've had a really good hunt and a hard hunt, you go home and you're pretty mentally fatigued, right? You go home and you're like kind of drained.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed that, especially during the rut when
Definitely.
you have the sits are longer and you're anticipating a deer coming from anywhere at any time? Because I don't want to be caught. So I'm constantly looking. I'm trying to scan the brush, find that deer before he comes out so you can get the drop on him. But I'm also anticipating prior to that where he's coming, mentally go through your checklist and go, I'm going to kill him right there. I'm going to kill him right when he goes beyond that limb. And then how often have you done that and went, why did I not trim that limb when I was trimming this standout? You literally don't get through some of these scenarios when hanging the set and trimming it. And more often than not, most spots I've been to, and I'm guilty of this, they're not trimmed appropriately to go in and bow kill a deer. Like, I think most people don't trim enough to make good ethical shots, in my opinion.
So that's a little bit off topic, but so you tend to err on, like, you would like big airplane landing strips and make sure everything's cut? Because I know some people err the other way and say, well, I don't want to get spotted in the tree, so they just make little holes. You would lean the other direction.
I make holes and I make shooting lanes in every possible angle, every possible situation, but I leave the cover to my back. I'm really a big back cover guy, so I have a lot of cover in the tree. A lot of times I'll drag it up there with me, to give myself back cover. Mm-hmm. It's the lack of back cover when I've gotten caught the most. Front cover is not nearly as important. In fact, front cover will cost you deer just because you got to shoot through it, over it, around it, whatever it is. I don't like a lot of front cover. I like back cover.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So let's take it to the next step. You've slow the game down. You've went through your checklist. You didn't rush the shot. You put the pin just there, a little bit low in the heart region. You trigger. The buck gets shot. What is going through your mind in those immediate moments, the first 10 seconds after that shot? Walk me through everything that's happening in your mind immediately after the trigger goes off.
First thing is interpret point of impact. Second thing is interpret penetration. Those two things have to be first and foremost because you're going to want to know those later. The third thing is, am I seeing blood immediately? The fourth thing is, if there's an exit, is there blood coming out of that exit? Where is that exit wound? If you get to see it when the deer runs off. So the moment I make a shot, I generally have my glass on. So my bow's down and I've got glasses up as quick as a cat to get them on that deer and get all of those bits of information because you've got like milliseconds, right, to find out whether you had good penetration. Where's the exit hole? Is there blood coming out of either one? And then fourth, how far is he going? I'm listening and watching. Listen, watch. I can't see him anymore. All right, now I'm listening. Do I hear him fall? And then I sit there and listen for quite a while more often than not because I want to hear – because oftentimes you'll have a hit where they'll go stand out there for 3 or 4 minutes and then boop, they fall over and you hear that secondary crash. Or you may hear that crash first times through and then you have to interpret – was that him falling over or was that him just, busting through brush? So you've got to interpret all that literally within seconds. And if you don't, then you find yourself going, what just happened? And then that's the worst feeling, right? I have no idea where I hit him. I don't know if I got penetration. I didn't watch where he went to landmark. You got to watch as far as you can so you can landmark the last little thing. And I'll often right away, I'll take my phone up and I'll point at the last place I saw that deer and I snap a picture. So I've got it, right? While you're still standing in that same position, I grab my phone, point the last place I see him and I snap a picture. And then my finger says, because you don't know, you might be coming back that night. You might be there the next day, but at least you can go to your last landmark because you got a picture of it. And then when you get out there, you go, oh, here's where I'm pointing at. I'm right here, So that's another thing that I do. Because all of those things are part of the overall evidence that you're going to need to track that deer. And it's another reason we did Deer Cast Track. We have a whole interview in there about the totality of evidence. John Engelken talks about the totality of it all the time. The buck's or the deer's demeanor, what he did after the hit. What does the arrow look like? What does first blood look like? Is there any hair there? Are there beds along the trail? All of those things add into the clues that help you find your deer and not bump the deer, because ultimately tracking comes down to not pushing that deer out of their initial bed or the bed they're going to die in. If you can do that, you're going to find a lot more of them. And if you start to pile up that totality of evidence, the moments after the shot, like your checklist literally switches gears from all the things we talked about leading into the shot to those 3 or 4 things following the shot. And if you're mentally doing all those things, it actually helps you perform more in the moment of truth because you're not screwing it up because you're all excited, fast forwarding through all that stuff going, I can't wait to get him on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
The worst thing you can do is worry about the prize before you actually go through the effort of finding the deer.
Yeah, it's almost like you see a lot of people, like they know this. They know they should be watching and thinking about these things and trying to keep track of all this data that happens in those first couple seconds. But then the rush of adrenaline and excitement afterwards is just kind of overwhelming. And then a couple hours later, they're back at camp and their buddies are, okay, so where was the shot? And there's like, well, I thought it was right behind the shoulder, but I don't know. Maybe I'm forgetting. There's all these things that seem to you almost black out in some cases and stuff gets fuzzy. It almost seems like it would be helpful if immediately after the shot you were required to answer all those questions right now. 10 seconds after, while it's still fresh in your mind before everything gets crazy, write down on your, maybe even in your app, right? Say, okay, point of impact was here. Penetration seemed to be this much. Last known point was XYZ. Just a way to document that before your mind gets even crazier in the next hour as you go through all that excitement.
100%. It goes along with the picture, right? Take the picture. If you're there by yourself, send it to your buddy and write out all your thoughts that you just had in the moment of truth. Go, here's what I thought I saw, da, 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 da. Write that list out, send it to him. Then you've got a copy of what you were thinking in the moment.
Yeah.
It was interesting in talking to John through this process because John's got tracking dogs, so he gets called in on the really bad hits. And if he's called in, something went wrong already, okay? So he's like, it is amazing to me how often, he said, I would bet 90% of the time when I find a deer that the guy described where he hit it, where the hit actually was, isn't the same. He said they will misinterpret it more often than not, and that's why they end up making a mistake when it comes to the tracking. So that's why podcasts like this, apps like DeerCast Track, will help guys get through that adrenaline learning curve, if you will, or that adrenaline roadblock that causes us to make bad decisions or just black out. Like you said, you just start missing things. And it's like, why am I doing that? Well, you're excited. That's why we're all out there hunting. But at some point, it gets back to the advice Tommy's given us for so long. Slow the game down, damn it. You're about to screw this up. Don't screw it up. Don't do it. Don't let yourself. Talk yourself through it and don't make that mistake.
All right. So then with that in mind, the first piece of data you can probably start adding to this totality of evidence is, other than, okay, you saw the point of impact, you noted to yourself what penetration was and where he went, those handful of things. You mentioned the deer's behavior. Could you walk me through a couple different common deer, what am I trying to say? When you watch a deer run off or go off, there's a few different types of behavior I've noted that typically would indicate something. Like if a deer does this, that probably means this kind of hit. I know you've seen the same things and you've called these out before. Could you walk us through a couple of those common types of behaviors that you've noted in the past and what they mean?
There's a bunch. Absolutely. Did he mule kick? Mule kicks, one of the first ones. Mule kicks oftentimes are positive. More often than not, a mule kick deer, I end up finding that deer. Although I've hit a few deer low that we didn't find that ended up alive, days later or weeks later, that mule kicked and we didn't get him just because the hit was very low and he mule kicked because of that. But more often than not, mule kick is a good thing. When you shoot them, were they calm? Okay. And then did they leave as a scalded dog? Okay. That I have noticed through time as being a generally good sign. Not all the time. One thing about deer that are hit with a bow or a gun or whatever, or tracking, there are some probabilities, but nothing is totally probable and anything is possible when it comes to white-tailed deer. But there are some things that generally lead you to believe, you know what, I smoked him and he's on his death run. So calm deer suddenly becomes scalded dog. That's generally not a bad thing either.
Sorry to interrupt, but before we go on, when you say scalded dog, do you mean like he's running off with his tail between his legs or like just out of there scared?
Out of there fast. Yeah. I mean, as hard and as fast as he can go. That's what I mean by scalded dog. Like he went from 0 to 50 as fast as he can do it.
Gotcha.
The other things that I look for are their ears. Do their ears droop back? Did they hunch up? Are you dealing with liver, stomach, or an intestinal hit? Are they hunched? Did they run 50, 60 yards, stop, hunch up, and then walk? All of those things are part of that totality of evidence. If you get a deer that does that, chances are he is not immediately fatal, and you better go to DeerCast Track or call some buddies and find out how long you need to wait. Because more often than not, a deer that runs 50, 60, 70, even 100 yards, stops, hunches up, and walks slowly, you didn't hit where you thought you did, or you didn't hit where you hoped you would. Also, another big one, did the deer stop, open his mouth, and then start to labor for breath? You would go, okay, well, that's a lung hit. More often than not, a laboring, breathing deer is oftentimes stomach or liver. So watch that type of stuff. Is he licking his nose very rapidly? Another thing that I look for. A deer that's licking his nose probably got blood coming up into that nose, and he's licking it, trying to figure out what's going on, right? So that would tell you there's something arterial that was hit or perhaps lung hit, and he's getting blood up into his nasal cavity, and he's feeling it in his nose, and he starts licking it.
What about the tail flick? So the deer runs off 50 or 100 yards, stops, and then starts walking away. Maybe not noticeably hunched up, but you see this like tail flick, this flick, 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 and slowly walking away. Is that indicative of the same thing?
I've seen tail flicks vary. I've seen them do that where they start flickering, and in general, I think that's a better sign than a poor one. And oftentimes they'll walk and then die and be dead within 3 to 5 minutes. So what I've noticed through the years, that scalded dog means that perhaps you cut something that was immediately fatal. You've hit the aorta, the jugular, the carotid, the pyloric, one of those main arteries, and they're running until they die, right? The run a little ways, scalded for a while, and then stop and start to walk with that tail fletching, they'll just walk to their death. That sometimes is double lung, but you didn't catch the artery going through the lungs, but yet still immediately fatal, but a little bit longer, not seconds, but minutes, right? But I've also seen deer hit high in the shoulder and walk away, tail twitching, looking around. Sometimes by the deer's alertness after the hit, look at their eyes, look at what they're looking at. Do they look like they're sick, or do they look like they're still attentive and they're not hit very well at all? That will sometimes tell you, okay, that's a little bit of evidence right there. He's not fatal yet. Intestinal deer will do that sometimes. They look very attentive, because there's not much hit back there. You go through a deer's intestines, he's going to die through sepsis one way or the other. If you didn't hit any arteries, you went straight intestines, you're looking at a 30, 32, 36 hour process. And all that stuff has to go throughout the deer's blood system and kill him by going septic. So, that deer's going to be very attentive in the immediacy after the shot, whereas liver hit deer, boy, it takes them, man, and they lose blood pressure. They start to wobble. They'll run into trees, and they feel real wobbly, and then they may go bed immediately because they don't feel good. Well, through time, they start to clot up, and that liver clots up in there, and if you haven't hit the artery that goes into the liver or runs past it, then he's going to regain his strength. He's going to bed 7-8 times. It may take 9 hours, 12 hours, 15 hours. Liver hit deer, depending on broadhead size, they vary drastically in mortality. The smaller the broadhead, the longer you're going to have to wait, perhaps 16, 18 hours if you're shooting a 1-inch. I call them pea shooters, not to criticize anybody, but I used to shoot those small broadheads, right? And you go through the liver, and all of a sudden you're going to wait 16, 18 hours. Switch to the bigger cut on, the mechanical type 2.3 from Rage. It dropped our liver hit wait time down to 7-8 hours. They're dead. A lot of times they're dead in 2 or 3. When you're killing by hemorrhage, you got to cut them. And if you're not cutting them, you're going to wait a lot longer. It's one of the reasons I switched away from smaller diameter broadheads. And I know a lot of guys are passionate about this point, but it all comes down to that point right there. And deer cast track, you look at a liver hit deer with a 2-inch to 2.3 inch cut, you're looking at, maybe 3 hours, maybe 6, 8, 9 hours, something like that, depending on which part of the liver. Same hit, smaller broadhead, like an inch, or say it's even 7/8 of an inch or something small, even if it's 3 blades, you might be 18 hours, 20 hours, because you just didn't cut enough. He's not bleeding enough. It didn't kill him. So they vary greatly in mortality.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
So speaking of broadheads and arrows, let's jump to that next stage then, which is you observe the deer, you're figuring out a little bit about its behavior. Now you got to decide, all right, it's time to go down and get the arrow. How long do you usually wait before getting down to check an arrow? And do you always go to the arrow, or are there some situations where you don't even want to walk the 20 yards that direction? You have to just back right out.
Yeah, if my gut tells me that this deer is not immediately fatal, then I'm waiting till dark, or I'm waiting till mid-morning when the wind gets up, and then I'm slipping down and out, and I generally don't go to the arrow if I feel there's any chance that he's right there, or could see me or hear me. And you run into that a lot with gut shots or stomach or intestines or liver, right? They'll run 60 yards, walk 20 and bed down, and they're just out of your sight, or they may be within your sight. I've had that happen before where they bed down and they bed there facing you and you're like, oh my goodness gracious. So you just got to make sure you don't bump that deer, because if you move that deer out of that first bed, and that's what every decision you make after you shoot that deer should be based around not moving that deer out of his initial bed. If you can do that, you are money ahead down the line. If you do that, and you all of a sudden take a trail that would have been 100 to 150 yards and turn it into 400 or 500 yards, well, I can assure you that additional 200 to 400 yards is going to be a nightmare for you, because they coagulate and clot up almost immediately, and you just can't find the blood. I mean, it's very tough. So I do everything I can to not move that deer out of his initial bed. So my thought process on going to look at an arrow, more often than not, unless it's a situation where he can't see you or hear you, I'll go out there and grab it and get out of there. But if it's one that at all, by chance, he might hear, see, or smell you, I'm getting down and getting out, and trying to make sure he doesn't know that I was there.
Okay.
I always err on the side of caution, right? Like even on double long hits, Taylor's always like, "You're so pessimistic, Dad, so pessimistic," and I'm like, I just try to be realistic, because through the years, it goes back to my conversation about, nothing's probable and anything's possible. Like I've had deer smoked. I mean, we got it on video, double lung. And 7-8 hours later, I'm still jumping this booger. And it's like, how is this possible, man? Blood trail as wide as a pickup truck, and he's still not dead. I mean, things vary from mortality inside of a deer. They just do. If you don't clip an artery somewhere in their body, chances are they're not going to die within seconds, which in our mind, we're all optimistic. Oh, let's go get the deer. Let's go get him. I know he's dead. Well, what if he's not,
Yeah.
So weather comes into play. You got to look at that as well. Are you dealing with rain coming? Is it cold enough to keep the deer good? If you've hit him back, here's another little known fact. And Bobby Culbertson taught me this one. A warm temperature deer that's hit through the intestines will die much quicker than a deer in cold temperatures, because the sepsis takes over in a much shorter period of time. So if it's smoking hot in the first part of the season, you're probably going to lose the meat, because it's the only way to kill him. But the deer is going to spoil as the deer actually sits there and dies. If it's colder, it's going to take much longer. You might end up retrieving the meat, but it's going to take much longer. Those deer that are hit back, I mean, you gotta do everything in your power to not hit them back there. It's still going to happen, but you want to make sure that you give the deer every chance you can to make a good, clean, ethical kill.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about how weather conditions impact your decisions, but I guess I'm going to try to stick in our little scenario here before I jump to that, because the next piece of evidence is what you see at the sign of the hit. Can you walk me through a few things you look for and what they might indicate?
I'm oftentimes at the sign of the hit, you don't get a lot. Do you ever notice that? It's like, well, there's no blood here, right?
It might be because we're red-green colorblind, Mark.
Yeah, exactly. There might be a lot more than we know. But oftentimes, some hair, White hair is a bad thing in general. Darker brown hair is good. Gray hair, in between somewhere. But sometimes there's hair. Sometimes there's immediate blood, which I like. That means you went through something quickly that spurted out. If that immediate blood turns into immediate and constant blood, that's probably a real good thing. You probably hit an artery that's under pressure, and you're going to find that deer very quickly. If, however, there's no blood, may or may not mean anything. How high was the hit? Was there an exit? Is there blood coming out both sides? That's one thing I always want to know, because I don't shoot a lot of poundage because I'm always dealing with that sore left shoulder. So I'm still shooting in the low 50s. So often, if you watch my shots on TV, they'll go through the onside, lodge in the offside, and not poke out the other side. But I'm shooting a 2.3, right? So I'm just driving it through, and I often don't get an exit. I'm oftentimes stuck in the off shoulder, frankly, and it's not going to exit through there. But the deer runs 70, 80 yards and is down for the count because I went through the good stuff. So just because you don't have immediate blood doesn't mean that the deer isn't dead. Did you shoot through the shoulder, and then the shoulder, actually the meat in that front shoulder can seal off the hole that then entered into the front body cavity? And I think that's something important that we haven't talked about. You can learn a lot about tracking deer and where to shoot deer if you'll just do an almost autopsy on every one that you shoot. And just even when you butcher them, like look at the bone structure, look at the meat structure and go, holy cow, if I hit a deer right here, look what I've got to go through to get in the cavity. Whereas if I'm 2 inches behind that on a quartering away, I got nothing to get through to get into that cavity. There's a big difference in that shoulder and the meat within that shoulder. So look at all of those different things when you're gutting a deer or butchering a deer, and it helps make better decisions going forward the next time you're out there afield. But back to your question, I'm looking at everything I can get, but often that first 50, 60 yards, there's not a ton of evidence there for you because, that blood has to start filling up inside the cavity before it starts spilling out that hole. So if you've got a mid-chest to above mid-chest, a lot of times those blood trails are kind of tough because, all the blood's inside.
Yeah. All right. So you're 40 yards down the trail then, and you finally get some really good blood. Color. I know there's a lot of, basic stuff out there, but is there any nuance to coloring that you're looking for to help indicate anything about the shot?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, man. I like pink. I like that bright red, pinkish air. You find air in blood, you're talking about something that's arterial, which is great. That's my first thing I look for. Is there bubbles present or is there not? And then I look at color. Pink, bright red, very good. Artery. Okay. So that's coming out of the heart, feeding the rest of the body. If, however, it's dark, and with no air, chances are that may be vein or meat. Then you look at how dark is it. If it's quite dark, almost maroon to brown, chances are that may be just a meat hit. Then you look at the presence. Is there grit? Is there any substance within it? All right, did you hit that stomach when you were actually, I smoked him, I'm in double lung. Wait, are you liver stomach? Or are you just clean liver? Those types of things are those hits will become evident as you learn to interpret blood and what the different blood signs mean. So I'm constantly looking at color and most importantly, content of the blood. Is it air? Is it not air? Is it grit?
Yeah. Are there any other pieces of evidence that we haven't touched on then that get you to the decision time as far as when to go? I feel like we've covered.
Absolutely. Like walking versus running blood is another one that I look at. Like, is it a distance between blood spots, and are the blood spots spatters to where they hit and then fan out, or are they droplets? Is the deer standing there? Is it puddling? The moment a deer on a blood trail stops and puddles and is standing there thinking, then I start to go back in time and go, okay, did I interpret this correctly? Did I hit where I thought I hit? Maybe I didn't hit what I thought I did. And I'm always, the moment they stop and start walking or standing, I'm like, not dead. He's thinking, what's going on here? One thing I've noticed about fatally hit deer, they will often run to their death, or they will run and then walk to their death. Deer that stop and start to think and start to look for a bed, that's the other thing, is meandering, looking for a bed. That's a deer that's not quite ready to die yet. And I'm like, oh, did I already bump him? That's a bad sign when you get to that. So if you've tracked immediately and you start to see that and you're on wet blood and you start to see a deer meander, you're like, oh, did I already run him out of here and didn't know that I did it. So, you gotta always be ready to give up, always be ready to go, things aren't exactly what I thought here.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because I feel like a lot of times when I've been out with friends, and I probably have jumped to this assumption too, when you see the puddle of blood, sometimes you jump to the opposite conclusion, like, oh, bunch of blood, he's going to be here any minute. Like he's right around here. There's a huge pool right here. That's so often what you hear. But you make an interesting point. It might be the exact opposite situation. And then because you get so excited and you think he's close, you actually do the worst possible thing, push him out of where he would have been.
Yeah, in reality, it just went from running to walking to stopped, and therefore the blood increased. When in reality, his speed decreased. His chances are he's not dead yet.
Yeah. Okay, so we've looked at all this evidence. We have analyzed the totality of evidence, as you guys are calling it. Now, I know in the tracking app, there's going to be a whole lot of different types of scenarios covered in a lot of detail. But can you give us just like a couple of the most likely, most common scenarios, and then how that impacts your decision as far as when to start tracking? So double lung, how long do you wait? Gut shot, how long do you wait? A few things like that.
Absolutely. If in any hit I see blood under pressure coming out or forming under the skin, whether it be on video or with my own eyes, once you see blood and lots of blood, then that's always a great sign. You've hit an artery that's under pressure coming out of the heart, and chances are that deer's dead before you get out of your stand. That's always a good thing. If you don't see the presence of blood, then that's a different scenario, and you have to start backing up. Even if you double lung them, sometimes you get a lot of blood on double lung shots, sometimes you don't. There are arteries, it's the aortic, that goes right through the middle of the lungs, up to the top of the back, and then backwards towards the back femoral artery. The aortic turns into the femoral back in the top of the ham, right? And it's really big up through there. It's quite big through the lungs. If you clip it going through, that deer's dead in seconds. And if you don't, it might be a little bit longer. I have a tendency to give double lung hit deer that don't bleed heavily at the impact an hour to two at least. If I do have a lot of blood right away, I go very quickly. The tricky one to me, and the one that I see people probably make the most mistakes on, is that heart, liver, stomach area along the bottom right there. I mean, literally through 6 inches, you go from immediacy to 9 to 12 hours to 24 to 30 hours within 6 inches. And I always say an inch will cost you a mile, right? A second might cost you a mile. If you don't think an extra second before you shoot, it might cost you a mile. If you're back an inch from the heart and you didn't hit it, you go, well, I'm in the ribs. I got him, man. I smoked him. Taylor had a hit like that 3 years ago. Forky the Pig, Missouri buck, Rage SS, straight through. I mean, just behind the heart. Missed the heart, missed the lungs, square through the liver. He was alive at the 14-hour mark the next day. Jeez. And we found him at 15. He was on his last leg. All right. We put that hit out on social media and said, what would you do in this situation? Everybody was smoked him, go get him, smoked him, go get him, smoked him, go get him. And that wasn't the case. And we interpreted it correctly that night. And we did that because of the blood sign. She made the hit. They waited till dark, backed out. I wasn't with her in this case. Scott Rupert was. We looked at the hit, and I said, man, you're right on that verge. You're right behind the heart. You might be just liver. And then we looked at the blood sign. It was dark. It had grit in it. And we were like, oh, we're out of here. We backed out, waited till 14 hours. We didn't jump the deer. We found him in his first bed. He did get up and move just a little bit, but he was dead at the 15-hour mark. So that hit right there, right behind the heart, you get through the liver, and everybody, I mean, 90% of the people that participated in that, and I'm talking, we had 200 or 300 opinions, were like, smoked him, go get him. So that's one of the reasons we did deer cast track, that right there, so that you can interpret the difference between that shot and that shot. There's also a difference in gut shot deer. Did you hit stomach? Did you hit large intestines? Front Did you hit mid or did you hit back? We examine all of those different hits. And the fact that arteries within a deer taper out and deplete as they run backwards within the deer, with the exception of the aortic, which goes into the femoral. But if you get into those guts, you run out of those things, and you are much better off, if you're going to hit one in the guts, to be a little bit forward, closer to the blood system, to the heart, which is pumping it, than you are to be at the back. Front of guts might be able to go in 20 hours, 24. Back of guts, probably looking at 30, 32, something like that. Big difference because there's not as much blood.
Wow. What about, we were talking lungs there a second ago. What about the dreaded single lung shot? For a while it wasn't dreaded, but I feel like recently it's been something that's talked about quite a bit. Is that something you've had trouble with?
We actually examined it in depth in the app, and it was interesting. Myself, Terry, Bobby, John all gave our opinions independently of the other. And we all had the exact same opinion on one lungs, and that is, more often than not, they don't die. We all said the same thing. One lung hits are the trickiest we've ever tracked. More often than not, you don't get them. The deer can go on one lung, plain and simple. So it more than anything else should keep you from shooting straight down onto a deer, or should make you disciplined in terms of the angle in which you shoot the deer if they are out there. You want to make sure that you at least take lung, liver, or both lungs out. Because if you get one lung, because these too far quartering away, then you're asking for trouble. You're probably not going to find the deer. One lung deer is probably the worst hit you can have as a bow hunter, in my opinion. One of the worst.
And how long would you wait in that kind of scenario?
I'll wait 8 to 10 hours probably, then go look. Either that, or if I've got a lot of room to go, one lung hit deer, probably the appropriate thing is get on them and get on them quick and try and keep them bleeding to try and bleed them out. Because once they coagulate, they're going to start to heal up. They're going to go on that off lung.
Yeah. So kind of along those lines then, what about the scenario where it's raining or snowing really heavily and you're worried that, you're going to lose blood? I've always struggled with this internally. I've always imagined there's two situations you could go for. You could say, okay, it's raining and snowing. I'm going to lose my blood soon. That means I need to start tracking sooner than later because I want to take advantage of what blood I do still have. That's option A. Option B is the opposite, which is, okay, I'm probably not going to have a good blood trail no matter what. So I want to make sure that I don't push him and make it impossible to find him. If I don't push him too soon, he'll bed down relatively quickly, and I can hopefully, with where I saw him last and then some smart grid searching from there, I'll find him close. Those have always been the two scenarios I've contemplated in my head. Which do you think is the better option, or is there something in between or different entirely?
I agree with both of those, and I think it probably goes some more thinking on top of that is, what shot am I willing to take today, given the forecast that I just looked at before I climbed in the tree or climbed in the blind, versus if there is no rain in the forecast for the next 7 days, right? Like if it's those days, like there's certain days, because Taylor shoots 1.5 inches, we just look at each other and go, you know what? Probably not a good idea to hunt tonight. If the blood trail's wiped out, we're not going to find the animal. It's not fair. Let's just hold off, And I'm the same way. There's nights where Wade and I go, we're not hunting tonight. You go through enough tough blood trails on great hits, and you go, we don't need anything working against us with snow or with rain. So if there's a fresh snowfall coming, I'm probably not going to hunt. If I do, my shot's going to be within 15 yards, and I know it's a freaking slam dunk, double long, watch them fall down in the field, that type of thinking. Same with rain. Rain's I oftentimes just don't go, or if I do, it's a slam dunk shot, or I'm not going to take it. I know I'm going to double lung the deer. So I think you add into your decision making or your thought process with, I'm gonna hold off on certain shots or not go at all.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and a good thing to be thinking about. Like you said, the ultimate, most important thing of all this is making sure that you do everything you can to recover a deer. And if you are shooting a deer that you don't even think is possible to recover because of those factors, then what the heck are you doing out there? So
exactly. Now, storms pop up that weren't predicted. What if you're shooting and you hit a deer, say in the liver, and all of a sudden, expected snow squall blows through and dumps 2 inches. Oh my goodness. Now what do? I have to wait. I know he's alive, right? Right now, I know he's not dead yet. So I'm in your option B there, where I'm waiting longer than you make sure you don't bump him out of that bed. Absolutely make sure and go out there and find him in that first bed.
Yeah, that's always what I've erred towards. I would rather just make sure it's not a 1.5 mile, 2 mile track job. That 100 yards away hopeful bed is a much better best case scenario, worst case scenario. Okay. So now we've made a decision as far as how long we're going to wait. We get back out there to do our tracking after the appropriate amount of time. We're kind of running out of time here, but I guess as much as you can share here about what your tracking process looks like, I would be interested. Like, how many people do you like to have? How many is too many? What things are you thinking about as you go? I know there's sometimes people like to do this. Someone always waits at last blood, and then one other person goes ahead and you do like a leapfrog approach. Anything you want to share as far as the actual tracking process?
Absolutely. I think it's vitally important. I like to track with 3 people. And I like someone at last blood and 2 other people that can see quite well out in front looking. If you're at night, I think the guy at last blood also needs to be looking forward in front of them to see if a deer gets up, with his light. Make sure you're not seeing eyes, that type of stuff, because they're focused on the ground looking for blood. You need somebody focused on inside the woods or inside the field or whatever you're looking for. Make sure you're not seeing eyes get up to make sure you didn't jump them. And I also think that when you have people tracking, it's not a bad thing at night. If you at all think that the animal could still be alive, well, first of all, you shouldn't be tracking. But if by chance you're like, this thing could be alive, be very quiet. And that's day or night. I always track like they're alive regardless. I mean, I just always make that assumption. They're alive until you find them. Because if by chance they're alive and you've tracked as if they're dead, you bumped that sucker 200 yards ago, right? And you just literally almost eliminated your chances of finding the deer. So I'm kind of I'm not the most pleasant guy to track with, because I'm really strict about shut up. Don't nobody says a word when we track. Nothing. We don't even utter a word unless it's whispering or hand signs, that type of stuff. Because, what if they are alive? What if we cause that deer to get up when we're 400 yards from him? I mean, you're ruining your chances of finding him, right? Like, what if the blood trail is 400 yards long and you struggled through the first 200 and you've talked through that 200 and you get to the 200-yard mark and you go, you know what? I didn't hit where I thought. We need to back out. Well, what if in that 200, the deer that was 400 yards away just put an additional 500 between you and him and you didn't even know it? You caused that and you didn't realize until you got to the 200-yard mark, I need to back out anyway. Well, take the precaution in that first 200 yards to not spook that deer. I'm also very cognizant of, like, if I'm on the edge of I need to wait 10 hours versus 12 hours, well, if there's a wind switch that puts me at a disadvantage coming at the 10-hour mark, I'm going to go a little sooner than I am later, if that makes sense. In other words, if the deer ran away in an upwind position and I'm getting ready to go track him, I'm looking at the wind direction for the hour that I'm going to go track him to go, you know what, we're going to have the wind in our favor, and go, oh, no, wind's at our back. I'm going to go before it turns if I can, or if it switches right away, I'm waiting longer before I go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and something that I haven't thought about enough.
Yeah, don't put your wind across the animal, So it's like, well, it's like, what if we put our wind across him? Well, he's gone, buddy. I mean, you're not going to find that deer. You better wait. You better make darn sure he's dead before you get on that track job, because he's going to smell you before you even get there. So think of every single thing that goes into a track job before you ever go out there. The weather ahead, the weather behind, what's coming. Is it heating up? Is it cooling down? Are you going to be dealing with frost in the first thing in the morning? Well, let's wait till it burns off, because you're not going to see the blood. It's a white carpet out there. Those types of things will help you.
What about the situation where you get out there after the appropriate amount of time and you lose blood? Do you have a system in place for how you try to expand out from there with a grid or a circle? Or in that situation, do you always back out and wait a little longer? What about that?
If we're convinced that they're dead, if we've convinced we've waited the appropriate amount of time, which more often than not when we track, we are fairly convinced the animal is dead. I always err on the side of caution. Then when I run out of blood, we look exhaustively, and I'm talking hours, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours trying to work that track out, because your best chance of finding an animal, in my opinion, is to get on blood, stay on blood until it leads you to a dead deer. Once you lose blood and you start the grid thing, more often than not, it's very difficult to find the deer. You can do it. You got a chance. But oftentimes, those deer that I end up gridding on, I get on camera, and a week later, 10 days later, 2 weeks later, whatever. Once we start gridding, more often than not, we don't find them. And oftentimes, it wasn't the hit we thought it was. It wasn't fatal. If you know it's fatal, if you know it's a gut shot deer and guts are protruding out both sides of the hole, there was zero blood along the entire track job, then I'm waiting the appropriate 30 to 32 hours or 36, depending on temperatures. And then my butt is going, and I've got a bunch of buddies. We're still quiet, and we spread out and we start gridding it very thoroughly.
Yeah. Anything beyond the obvious when it comes to a grid search strategy, or is it just spread out, walk?
It's that grid strategy, and I use the onX app. I put my tracker on to make sure that I'm hitting everything thoroughly and I'm not leaving any holes. And that app will help you grid appropriately. For years you go, okay, well, let's take this, take that. Well, you didn't know whether you hit that area or not. Well, that tracker on you, and it shows you where all you've been and all your buddies have been, whether you've appropriately gridded it or not.
Yeah, very, very helpful tool. I do the same thing. Now, when you're out there looking,
by the way,
awesome. Agreed. Yeah. Another thing, a lot of times people are thinking about when they get to that body search period, right? It's a bad scenario to be in, but if you end up in that scenario and you're trying to grid search or just looking for it with nothing to guide you, oftentimes people will kind of run out these tropes like, well, a buck will never run uphill, or a buck's likely to go to such and such place. Are there any of those types of things that you either believe are very true and we should think about, or are myths?
The buck up the hill, I just dismiss, because I've seen fatally hit deer go straight up a hill and die at the top of it, one of the steepest hills you could possibly imagine. I've seen gut shot deer go through hill and hollow and die in the fifth one. I mean, it's back to the anything is possible scenario when it comes to that type of stuff. There are some things that I look for when it comes to that, but it's probably generally the further back you get in the animal and the longer it takes them to die, the more likely they become, in my opinion. The two things they'll go seek out: really intense cover, because they feel fairly vulnerable, or water because they're thirsty. So I have a tendency to hit that really, really thick cover and those watering holes. It's amazing how many deer you find by a watering hole or a water source when they're fatally hit, especially when the hit is back.
Yeah. That seems to be a consistent thing I've seen and heard. And
look in the sky, man. Look for buzzards, look for crows, look for birds, listen for birds. We found a pile through the years. Just, Mother Nature will help you find them. Coyotes, Terry killed Dangerous Calling last year, and he had a hit that was back and low. And, we couldn't find the deer. We had rain hit, washed the blood trail away. We knew roughly where he went, and couldn't find him in one of my, my big grass patches, all my warm season grasses. Those things are miserable to track through, by the way.
Oh, I bet.
And, Wade and I were hunting not long after that. When within a day or two or three, whatever it was, we hear coyotes open up over in that end of the farm. And I'm like, listen, that's not far off from where we were tracking Dangerous Calling. And now I'm telling you, we had gridded and stomped it out and looked, and we could not find this deer. We gave it days worth of effort. And then we heard those coyotes in a little bit different spot, went there, and there he laid. So sometimes, as Terry said that night, Mother Nature gave him back.
Yeah. It's nice when they lend a hand in that way.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we lost the meat of the deer, but I mean, we've never looked for a deer harder or more thoroughly than we did for that deer. I mean, it was days.
Yeah. Better to find it in that situation than never at all, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You owe it to the deer to give it all you got. And if you do and you fail, then sometimes you chalk it up to experience, and you try to make a better shot the following time.
Yeah. Live and learn.
And that's what life's about. About the time you know it all, you're going to pass away. So.
Yeah, that's the truth. And
that's why people of age are so wise, man. They've done it, seen it.
And I guess, speaking of wisdom, this has been another one of those conversations. You never fail to be very, very helpful, Mark. This is we're gonna have to wrap it up because both of us are over time here a little bit. But man, really interesting, really helpful. So thank you.
Oh, man, thank you. I appreciate it, Mark, and hope everybody has a great fall this year. Check out DeerCast. Check out DeerCast Track. We also added in there this year in the elite version, DeerCast Custom. It allows you to take our algorithm, customize it to your farm. You know, if you feel like we're a little too optimistic, you can tone it back. If you feel like we're not optimistic enough, you can crank it up a little bit, you know, so you can customize our algorithm. And this year, for the first year, we're going into a pay model. Last year, it was free throughout the whole year. We had over 550,000 people download the app, and this year we still got a free version. We got a pro model at $9.99 annual fee, one-time fee, or we've got the elite version, which has track and custom and the 10-day forecast, and that's $19.99. So everybody check it out. The other thing that often goes unsaid about DeerCast, we do an article a day in there. There's over 400 articles in DeerCast right now. And, you know, by this time next year, we'll be over 700. So it's like a little app magazine, and it's literally loaded with content inside those articles. We've got a staff of like 13 or 14 writers that do a phenomenal job. So everybody check it out, and hopefully they enjoy the stuff we're putting in DeerCast.
Yeah, it is some really high quality stuff. I can attest to that. And what general time frame, or when should people expect to be able to access this new stuff?
You know, we're soft launching here in early August, so by mid-August, hard launch, it'll be out, and, you know, certainly in time for when the first seasons open up out west. And it's she's going to be rolling heavy by late August, but here anytime, you know, mid-August, it's ready.
Awesome. Well, I, for one, am excited to put it to work. So thanks for this chat, and thanks for putting all this great, helpful content out there for everybody.
Oh, man. Appreciate you, Mark. Thank you so much for having me on. I always enjoy visiting with you.
Me too. And that is a wrap. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did. Like I said at the top, I knew this one was going to be fascinating. I definitely found it to be so. I'm glad we got to share this with all of you, and hopefully all of us will be able to put this advice to good use in the coming weeks and months as our hunting seasons kick off. I certainly hope I've got a couple opportunities to work on perfecting my my moment of truth process and my recoveries. So until then, thank you for listening, and stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.